So without further ado, we move on to our speakers, and we've taken a different slant with our PhD students over the past little while, and that has been that we found it more and more important that the students come in an earlier stage of their studies. We were having a situation where people coming right at the end of their studies, and so the opportunity to change wasn't really there. And students actually asked us, I wish I'd come earlier, because then I could really have actually changed what people said, because I got such value out of the session. So it's not, I'm not telling you to be gentle on Raymond, but the reality is we've asked people to pose questions. So Prof. Krishna will drive the session, but Raymond has asked specific questions where he wants to almost give you his methodology and say, do you think this is the best approach? And really for you to be kind of a bit brutal and say, no, actually, I don't think you're going to get to where you want to go with this. So it's very important that this remains an engaging session and not one in which he just sits here and sort of explains. Today it's a little bit different because Raymond is actually a PhD candidate, but he also is an academic at DaVinci. So he's representing the brand today, but Raymond holds a Master of Commerce in Industrial Psychology as his qualification that led into his PhD, and I won't go into all the details you can read, but I think for him his passion lies in human resources, industrial psychology, and sort of those aspects, which is why higher education is where he found himself. And that's why you'll see that his topic is private higher educational programs, qualifications, and the fourth industrial revolution, the development of an institutional integration framework. So Raymond, I didn't see where he is. Oh, there you are. Without further ado, in our shadow, I introduce you. And can I please just ask that you speak up, because a lot of the time people around find it a bit difficult to hear. So please just make sure you speak up.
Okay.
So I hand over to Prof. Krishna to interrogate you. But just so you all know the questions, Raymond sort of wants an idea of has he selected the best research design applicable to his study, speaking of which approach he's taken. He wants to know if you guys think that it's an achievable and a deliverable goal based on his methodology. He'd like to understand how private higher education institutions can better prepare students for the fourth industrial revolution. And also looking at his research problem, he'd like to know who else he should include in his sample compared to who he has. But Prof. Krishna will prompt the questions as we go along.
Thanks, Mala. Raymond, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Thank you, Mala. And I think it's safe to say I welcome any questions, because the discussion that Mala has already laid on touched many of the aspects that Brian touched on, Kermit and Victor. And then I can basically start with my ontology, what drives me to this particular topic. I'm not quite sure if I can say, unfortunately, I started working for Mode 1 University, this traditional university, and then the things that we did there, or the things that we learned, the qualifications that are structured there, the curriculum, the mode of teaching is different from the way that DaVinci, now I'm working for DaVinci, is totally different from the way that we're doing, we teach our students, the curriculum is structured in a different way. And then there's something that Brian touched on, that people are focusing mainly on technology. And I don't think we should focus mainly on technology. It's quite sad when you say technology, and then we have to teach our students how to compute, how to code. We are forgetting about softer skills. And then these are things that are not being taught in our curriculum, qualification, and the modes of teaching. So basically, I'm going to look at the higher education system in South Africa and fourth industrial revolution. Is our qualification, is our mode of teaching and curriculum preparing our graduates, our students, for the future world of work? So I don't have the answer. So I believe.
We won't be doing a study.
So,
Yes.
so what's
one
your
thing-
methodology? How are you going to get us there?
I'm going to get there. So basically, I thought in terms of methodologize, this research leans towards a qualitative design. And then in terms of mode of inquiry, I thought maybe I should use a grounded theory because it will help me understand people who have gone through this phenomena and then people that are still going to get through this. So that's what I think it's the best solution for me. I mean, methodology.
Can we perhaps intervene and ask the questions now when we go? Because he's put as one of his questions, should he adopt a phenomenological approach or grounded theory?
Yes.
So he says he's going to choose grounded theory. Now, do we think that that is the right approach in terms of, so we need to understand what is grounded theory before we move on. So perhaps why you think you're going to choose grounded theory?
Okay, so grounded theory, you'll be interviewing people who have gone through the same qualification, and then did it help them to prepare them for the future of the world of work, right? And then these people have got different aspects. Maybe I'm going to target the sample, I'm going to target the students themselves, head of departments. That's what my kind of feel I was leaning towards to. And then I'm not sure whether it is going to give me the same.
You don't have to respond to me looking at me.
No, I'm not responding to you.
But I mean, if it's about experiences and you're trying to look at something, why would you not take a phenomenological approach to it?
Because I wanted people from different age group, and not different people who have experienced this phenomena under different circumstances.
But that wouldn't impact if you chose grounded theory or phenomenological.
Because I'm sure your supervisor will guide you, as Mala says that, because what is the purpose of ground? That's why I asked, what is the purpose of grounded theory? Because clearly it's a topic that's been researched, been published.
Yes.
So it's not like, you've got to develop, as much as there's going to be advancement in knowledge, but it's not like creating fundamental knowledge that is not there. So maybe you should have the exchange with your supervisor. What kind of guy, what does your supervisor have to say about it?
So my supervisor, he said, go read between phenomenology and grounded theory, and then we discuss which one would be the best solution. I mean, the type of research design you can use for this particular
So if Mana says perhaps you should use the phenomenological approach, so I guess you're still early in your early days of reading, or
Yes, I'm still early in my reading, and then I'm still yet to get more information on this particular topic.
So I think what's important to remember, if it's a phenomena and it is something about experience, then often they're connected to phenomenological studies, but it's very much up to as your study unravels, I think you'll start making decisions, but as long as you justify the reason that you've selected what you've selected as well.
But what epistemological stance have you taken to inform you towards a qualitative approach and then the grounded theory strategy?
And then in terms of
how did you unpack that epistemology?
I looking at that I do not have any answers myself. I've got my own assumptions, but with the assistance of the participants that are going to be involved in this study,
So
they're going to help.
co-create the
Yes,
reality.
exactly. So that's why I'm going to choose an interpretative-based paradigm
Interpretative paradigm.
Yes, as a epistemology.
I think grounded theory is
it fits in with the qualitative mode, no doubt. But
mode.
yeah,
And grounded theory starts with a hunch.
Yes.
So having the hunch and then take it where it goes to unpack it further, I think is a good approach. I'm curious about how to interpret the data and what the outcome.
And
Mechanisms then for interpreting the data.
And I think this is a very important lesson in terms of research, is
Yes.
both can be argued, but it's about which one you will be able to justify based on the rest of your study, and that becomes critical, because in the end, you can argue for either and you can get it to basically fly, so to speak, But it's really critical that you'd be able to justify, and I think being able to unpack things from an ontological and epistemological and say, why did you select this? Why did you go with an interpretivist paradigm over something else, constructivist, whatever it is? So it's really important that every step of the way, you justify every reason why, and you make sure that you do that, because I think that way it makes for a stronger argument.
And also the point that Mara makes is that you've got to be consistent in your message. You know, sometimes students start off with this approach and they all nice. They finish the methodology chapter, and then when they start doing the literature, the data collection, they drift into another angle. So that's why you said, your supervisor said, read around phenomenology, read around grounded theory, and then be clear, because you might be straddling. But the valid questions was asked there by the participants that think clearly. You must be clear from the beginning about your philosophy, your paradigm.
Yes.
And that must guide you through, because I find students sometimes drifting. But nevertheless, can we move on to the problem? What is the problem? I know you've kind of skated around the problem, but what is the issue and what is the key question you can answer?
Okay, so the main problem here is the qualification, curriculum, or mode of delivery. Is it preparing our students for the world of work? Is the regulator imposing this qualification, imposing this curriculum, imposing this mode of teaching to universities so that we can produce students? For instance, in Mode 1 university, right, we just cram learning theory. There is no application part in those curriculum, and then you produce graduates who do not even know how to conduct work.
Yeah, but if I can come in here, Raymond, is that institutions are, to a certain extent, allowed to be agile in terms of the curriculum. So you might have, as the regulators, given you accreditation for a certain period, but institutions are not precluded from making changes or, as I said, as being more responsive in terms of, as long as they don't change 50% of the curriculum, because then it becomes a new project. So it's up to us. I think DaVinci is very agile in that respect, you understand, in terms of making sure that we are more relevant out there in terms of curriculum and those kind of things. So perhaps you keep talking about Mode 1, Mode 2. So I think your concern is that the traditional universities in the country are doing traditional things, but maybe on the surface, but everyone's around the hype, around the buzzword fourth industrial revolution, so we don't know what they are doing. So your study might point us in that direction.
So if I were to ask you to just state your question. So yes.
No, I think you need to look more carefully at the role of a regulator and the role of the higher education institution itself. I would be very uncomfortable if the thinking is that the regulator is imposing.
Yes.
Because higher education institutions develop their own curricula.
Agreed.
Based on their learning program. There's a qualification registered on the NQF with learning outcomes. And if you read current literature, the whole world is going in terms of what are the learning outcomes, what should they be to prepare people better for a 21st century. And then we start looking at critical cross-field outcomes, which are embedded within every qualification, or should be. And we're still looking for universities that actually that's taught, like Mode 2. DaVinci should be teaching or allowing that to emerge, and yet it doesn't, even though it is Mode 2. So I think if I were you, I would rather less is the regulator and rather in your topic, the private higher ed and the fourth industrial revolution, you are looking to develop an institutional integration framework. Rather, how does DaVinci take learning outcomes, critical cross-field outcomes, all of those things? How do we embed that in our curriculum? And how do we then advise a regulator to say the world has changed and moved? And really the things people need now to cope better are other things. So I would like to swing it the other way, and I would also like to suggest somewhere, listening to your methodology, that you maybe have a look a little bit at historical research methodology and narrative research methodology, especially if you're looking at private higher ed and what have been institutional frameworks, and looking a little bit at that historical thing. Why is Mode 2 so strong? Remembering Mode 1, should I say, so strong, it looks at theory, whereas Mode 2 contextualizes the theory in a world of application. So I would get my definitions very clear and my understandings of what the terms are, who does what with whom and how it functions.
And I think by going with what Dr. Lloyd also suggested is you then take away, because my question to you was, do you speak of qualifications? So do you mean across every type of qualification, every different faculties, etc.? And by doing it this way, that would take away some of those questions, because you would be looking at it very specifically, linked to outcomes and how they're implemented. So that would take away some of the questions I had. I think there was
Sorry.
I just wanted to ask you, if you're involved what you're doing, but I think you're going to have to find somehow, you're going to have to integrate the past education, because I mean, past education, the people that have worked in the system, how are we going to get those people into the fourth dimension? Because somehow they're going to have to be taken one level up to be able to understand what is going on around them. Because you're going to have the new generation coming through that is now in the fourth revolution. You're going to have to take the guys in the first, second, third, and third to be able to bring them to the same level.
Yes, that was.
Otherwise, we're going to have a serious issue.
Okay, that was also my thinking. That's why it was leaning towards grounded theory, that these people have already experienced 1, 2, 3. What was missing on 1, 2, 3, and how can we incorporate it into the fourth?
Okay. Raymond, the other thing is that linked to what Dr. Lloyd and Mala mentioned is that it'll be a big ask if you go looking at cross qualification. How many qualifications are there? So maybe you should focus on specifically maybe the management qualifications or the science qualifications, whatever. Otherwise, you can't look at it. It'll be very wide, and that links to the outcomes. So you will focus more specifically in terms of how are the institution preparing students for this new thing. Yes. And the point that came out from our shadow there is that you're looking at people going through into the entering system and exiting the system.
Yes.
What about those who have exited the system? So it means upskilling and retraining and those kind of things. So think about it, that might become a great task. You need to bring focus to your study and upfront explain that the scope of your study is about this and this and this.
I see this Trishan and Mario.
I think Mario an opportunity.
Yeah.
I agree with Prof, because the more focused is, the more ability your research can be used to change. Because without that, where does it stop and where does it start? Because you can take it a step back and say, if you look at the matric curriculum, right, the outcome looks the same from now as it was when I was in matric. So with everything changing, that hasn't changed. So if you don't put a start and an end to it, it'll be hard to almost focus it.
And then on that point, what about the curious skills? They're already using this.
No, 100%. So the method of delivery is very different, but the outcome they're achieving is still the same from when I finished. Because they still measure against that yardstick or that benchmark. So you have to focus it. Otherwise, where does it start and where does it end? Okay. So yes, the method of delivery is 100% different, but the outcome they're trying to achieve is exactly the same.
All right. Thanks,
No.
Maybe our design expert, design dean, can I come in
I
here?
just want to pick up on something that Prof. Krishna said. I agree that you almost need to limit your focus to a specific type of qualification. Recently we started the design of a qualification aimed specifically at innovation managers. That ties very nicely in here. So what is it that informs that curriculum to prepare the individual for the fourth industrial revolution, which, like Brian said, each industrial revolution has these characteristics that carry from one to the next, and one of the primary characteristics of the fourth industrial revolution is how we access and use information. So just very simplistically, that would be a key focus in the study as to how do these particular curricula prepare individuals to access and use information. But then as a second question, what is the relevance then of private higher education? So if the focus is on curricula, what element does a private higher education then that makes us, what relevance does it play?
I was going to drop the private higher education, then use both public and private higher education. So that what applies in private also applies in public universities.
And also
Because
just,
it's
just to then also explain what you mean by an institutional integration
Mm-hmm.
framework. I think that's important. So what do you mean by that?
I was going to bring you to the I was going to bring you to the leadership. That it should start with the leadership going down.
And if leadership, because institutional means you are aligning it to an institution or typical private or public institutions.
So whatever applies in private education also applies in.
But I don't think
public.
you're answering the question around, Dr. Lloyd's asking the institutional integration framework.
Yeah,
what is
what
that, that concept together? What does it mean? So a conceptual framework means something. What does an institutional integration framework in your mind mean? What is an integration framework for you in this context?
In this context, I was trying to look at a stated institution, right? And then when I need I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah, you don't have to answer because you make notes of it.
Just
Make
it's
notes because
important to be very clear.
engage your supervisor.
I think
Okay.
what Dr. Lloyd's also pointing out here, Raymond, is that every single word you use in a thesis has meaning. And if you cannot unpack that, define it and explain it, you can't use it. So you need to make sure that whatever you choose, you are able to unpack every single one of those words. And we recognize that you're very early in your study.
Yes.
But it is important as you go along that you don't forget about this, because it's nice to have fancy words, but if they don't mean anything, or you can't actually with comfort explain what that is and make sure it is integrated,
Yes.
and it is all those things, and it is a framework, not a model, etc., then
It's still going to be
Yes.
Question you need to ask, what are you
Yes.
integrating?
Yes.
And I think Mario raised a very important fact that was between Dr. Lloyd and Dr. Landman, and that's around curricula versus
Qualification.
teaching and learning, because you spoke to a lot of things. So are you going to be looking, I'm interested to know, are you going to be looking at curricula and the teaching and learning approach, etc., or just at the curricula? What is your plan?
I was going to look at curricula and the mode of delivery, teaching and learning.
Okay, so
Yes.
both. That's quite
Yes.
a big scope.
Yeah.
That's
So should I limit it to only
Yeah,
one?
because I think when the teaching and learning has different functionalities that informs it. So it's not just about preparing someone for a specific job or to acquire specific knowledge set. It has to do with the type of student. It has to do with whether they're full-time or part-time students. So I think that makes it very, very broad. But if you focus on what needs to go into curricula to prepare students for the world of work in the fourth industrial revolution, I think that's a neater focus than just looking at education in general.
Could I?
Yes, I agree with Dr. Lloyd. And I'd like some of the faculty and those of you that have been in class and those that are students to comment as well.
I'm going to throw a curveball here, and because you're very early in your study,
Yeah.
and why I'm saying it's not totally different, but when you look at you're looking at curricula, you're looking at teaching and learning, which is good, because if you look at the intended learning outcomes stroke curricula, the taught and assessed learning outcomes stroke curricula, and the attained learning outcomes stroke curricula, we're touching on at the meta level, intended, what do we envision as a country, as a system? And you're talking system, so you can look at that. For the curriculum to deliver in a fourth industrial revolution context. The taught and assessed one is where the big problem lies. Because most of your teachers, lecturers, facilitators do not understand what the intended curriculum was and what the regulator was thinking, if you want to use regulator. And therefore they teach and assess what they presume and assume. So there's a big gap there in terms of their own training. The attained curriculum is that's where the learner comes in. So you've got the teaching and then the learning, and the learning is reflected in the attained, which is our results, our throughput, etc., etc. So you might want to then, because your topic lends itself very well there to looking at all of that and what all of that is and how we must take that forward within the context of fourth industrial or fifth industrial or development.
I think the what's coming out here is the thing about the graduate attributes. The end result is that what kind of a graduate are you going to, when they qualify and we award the qualification, what kind of graduate?
Yes.
Are they fit for purpose, if I may use that within inverted commas, right? So meaning that are they relevant in terms of the training and education? So you read widely, it's early stages in your study, and then you bring it down. It's a funnel approach.
Yes.
You can read widely, bring all the issues, and then maybe take the reader into saying, given that, you're going to focus on, if need be, what you're going to focus on, because you can't save the world through your PhD. You understand?
Yes. Yeah.
You have to deal with something that's realistic and achievable and move on.
Yes.
So I think because your background industrial psychology, you're focusing on that kind of training and things. Is it, because University of Johannesburg has gone straight. Everything is in the fourth industrial revolution. And most recently they had a debate with the vice chancellor and a professor there who came with other different views. They created a platform for mature conversations. So I think, when Y2K was coming about, it was like fear introduced everyone. This was happening. I feel this was happening, but we shouldn't fear. We are in the education space. We should embrace this and say what can be done. You are creating new knowledge, so use the space to create knowledge in a focused and in a directed manner.
In military circles, you don't train people in Antarctica, and then you send them to go and fight in the desert. The uniform and the whole thing in space will be messed up. So now I think for my brother, before you get yourself trapped in all this, you needed to live in the fourth industrial revolution yourself and understand what happens in that world. Appreciate it and learning. By the time you come back here to write as to how do you want to transport us there, you have some clarity exactly as to where are you taking us to, how are you going to take us there, why do we want to, did we say we want to get there? And I see lots on your writing there, you do lots of management. I think 4 or 5 times management appears. Change management to ownership. Who says the next companies in the fourth industrial revolution, you're still going to be having businesses where people are being employed? Look at Google model, where people are no longer necessarily in a space where you can manage them, but it has become a matrix of working freely without timetables. As long as you're on your computer, you can work. So even the management model you're talking about has to interrogate the kind of space the fourth industrial revolution is working at. So if you're still talking management, maybe you want to tweak that into ownership. People are going to buy into organizations and work to those organizations from our areas of comfort.
And I think one of the questions you asked, which I'd like you to speak to about, you've spoken to your sample, and I think those points are very relevant, that if we're looking at things like graduate attributes and you do decide to look into that, you have to go into the industry and find out as well what is needed. Because I think that is a critical aspect of, because that's how these type of conversations will unfold. Yes. So you asked about your samples, and I think for me, you can't look at something like a qualification without embracing academia and embracing industry needs as well as government imperatives if it's in the country. So for me, that triple helix model is really critical if you're going to be looking at something like curriculum and teaching and learning, etc.
So my sample was thinking of business leaders and students themselves that went through this phase, and academias and the government employees. So I was asking who else should I involve or think of to include in my sample.
Is that qualitative or quantitative?
Qualitative.
Yes.
Yeah, yet again, the higher education system of any country is aligned to the imperatives of the country. So you must think about that as well. That the regulators have to come on board in terms of what direction they give. Higher education legislation and those kind of things, because there's the new dynamics of private institutions becoming defined as universities as well, because it has been always that the publics are the university, yet the knowledge generation has been taking place in the private as well. It has not been given the recognition that it deserves. Yet in the National Development Plan they talk about preparing the PhDs. By 2030 we need X number of PhDs. So they want X percent of academic staff. So, and it's clearly outlined that the publics would not be able to deliver. So that's one area we can look at. But nevertheless, I think perhaps, can we go on to the other question that you had here is, you spoke about your sample. The other one, you want to know from us whether this study is achievable. here the point was made about focusing. Understand? Focusing your study, and under guidance of your supervisor, you get, you'll be more focused. Because sometimes, as I said, we want to save the world. I remember when I started I was want to do anything and everything, and then you need some kind of guidance. Say, hold it, leave that for the postdoctoral. Get your doctoral first.
If you do get there.
But perhaps, the audience can also discuss if they think it is something that's achievable.
Sure.
I'd like to suggest it's very achievable. I think it's very on point, it's timeless, it's necessary. I think what I would suggest is you clarify your scope of the study, the parameters, and get clear understanding of what the terms and all of that mean. But I think it would be a very, very important voice into the current dilemmas that most institutions are facing. And how do we adapt and amend, and what modes of delivery do we use? How do we go forward? So I think if you're taking it within the parameters you suggested, and maybe the private higher ed is one of your parameters. Maybe the public is a too big a space. Maybe you need to look at certain institutions. So, but I think it is a good study right now, and I think it would add a lot of value.
Yeah. One caveat there is that you need to check if the previous through your reviews, literature reviews, and check other studies have not been done in this area. Just be careful about that, because you might find that for us here, we might have a limited, understanding of what's taking place out there. But once you start doing your literature search, you realize that there are lots of studies that are taking place, or some studies are concurrently taking place. So you may have to tweak your study slightly to make it look different. Any more contributions? Questions, perhaps? All right. Raymond, is there anything from your side?
No, I think thank you for the suggestions, contributions, and ideas. I'll take everything into consideration. Yeah.
I'm glad it's early days in
Yes.
terms of your study, and then use this opportunity, mull over the issues,
Yes.
have engagement with your supervisor, and I think good luck with whatever you're trying to do.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.